Evening all, welcome to another self-isolation. Nick, how's it going?
Good, Chris. How are you doing tonight?
Pretty good. We're getting pretty familiar with you around here, but I'm glad to have you back.
Yeah, no, happy to be here. We'll try and change it up a little bit, talk less, time more, and get cracking.
I have a feeling based on tonight's topic, we might get through more than one fly in the stream.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, we how about this? We promise not to pull an all-nighter. No
there
one
you
can listen to me that long.
go. Well, we proved you wrong there last time.
Yeah.
I had enough people watching. That's cool. So for anyone who's just tuning in and hasn't had a chance to watch the streamer streams that we did with Nick, Nick's an awesome angler, lives up on the Grand River, been fishing it the majority of his life. He's a tying ambassador with Renzetti, local guide, and something that we also wanted to throw into the mix and talk a little bit about because it's very applicable and on everyone's minds this time of year. Is you're also pretty actively involved with a group called Friends of the Grand as well. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sorry, Chris, you're a little jumpy there. Yeah, so
Yep.
Friends of the Grand. I think a lot of people that are familiar with the Upper Grand fishery and have been around the area are definitely familiar with Friends. It's a nonprofit organization that was formed back in the early days of trying to create a brown trout fishery in the Upper Grand from basically Bellwood down through Elora and into Westmont Rose. It's been a great organization. It's basically the reason between us and the MNR that the fishery has become what it is, and we're pretty proud of it. Became a board member with a couple friends of mine about 3 years ago now, but I've known all the guys that really started the whole movement back. I think we're about 26, 27 years ago now. So, we've gone through some challenges, we've gone through some turnover, but we've really found in the last couple of years we have a lot of new motivation and fresh blood, trying to plan a lot of new things because, the fishery itself and the amount of fish we put in to try and support it every year is, it's dependent on a lot of studies and a lot of research that was done by the experts in the past to kind of establish, what the understanding was about what a river can support, what the trends show, and all that. And so we've got some new kind of ambitions and some new goals that we're setting now. We're trying to get going on maintaining all of our current projects and activities we do, and certainly maintaining fish stocking. But we're trying to go beyond that and trying to put some science behind, what was originally done and proven, and trying to show that, over the last 25 years, there may be some need for change, or at least to evaluate the health of our fisheries. So there's the guys on the board have really taken initiative in pursuing that through our relationship with the MNRF and the GRCA and some of the other experts, involved with fish management plan and things like that in Ontario. It's been really great to see some traction there. So anyways, the good news is we did stock again this year, and we did put in the same amount of fish. So stocking on the Upper Grand happened Monday, Tuesday of this week. Very limited crew, no volunteers due to COVID for the second year running. Jason King actually manages on behalf of Friends. He works with the hatchery and the MNRF to maintain the stocking program. So he couldn't even fish last night. He's so sore from running buckets and running the hopper through and getting fish in. But I think we did successfully get somewhere around 23,000 fish dropped, all yearlings. So they're pretty healthy, strong fish, and they did great. Not a lot of mortality coming off of the truck. Things went really good. The fish were very excited to get out of that tank and into the river. So last night, it just going out and having a look, there's a lot of fish even rising already. So really good scene there. It was nice to see that Jay and everyone was able to get that together.
Yeah, no kidding. And yeah, for people who may not be super familiar with the river, despite being one of, if not Ontario's most popular trout fishery, or Southern Ontario's at least, it's not a natural river, or not a natural trout river, I should say, which a lot of people may not know in that stretch. So without you guys and without the stocking efforts you do, we'd be seeing bass and pike and no trout up there. So it's definitely very, very much appreciated. If anyone going forward, I know you don't really have any volunteer activities going at the moment. But if anyone wanted to help out with you guys, volunteer wise or otherwise, how might they do that?
So sorry, helping out with Friends of the Grand. So you can do whatever, as much or as little as you want. You can become a member. That's first and foremost, and get involved by becoming a member and supporting the board. We are a non-for-profit. With the pandemic over the last 2 years, our fundraising and our ability to communicate has really fallen flat. So I mean, we're very stable at this point, but we are looking very ambitiously and aggressively to invest in our fishery again and put some money where our mouths are and try and get some things done. So we've been even spending money in the last couple months on some hobo temperature gauges so that we can drop them in the river and start maintaining and replicating that study that was done. And there's cost to all that. Maintaining the access points, there's labor and cost there. So, becoming a member is great. Just like signing up to a TU chapter as a member, you're really contributing and your funds really go a long way. But it also gives you the ability to communicate and connect with us and know what we're doing. Even without becoming a member or signing up to the board, just as a volunteer. So as you see the projects come out through our Facebook page or Instagram or newsletters, as a member, you can you'll get a handle on when our projects are happening, what our work projects are, what we need support for, what we need help with. It could be as simple as planting a tree or cleaning up garbage to offering support in graphic design or marketing to try and develop our website and get it back up and running. So those are the kind of easiest ways. Volunteer, become a member. And I mean, if you're wanting to go a little further, we're always looking for new support at the board level. That's where we kind of delegate the tasks and the roles and responsibilities, and there's always a lot of gaps. So anyway, you can reach out to any of us. You can reach out to us on Friends of the Grand's Facebook page, which is generally the best way to get a hold of us right now. Our website has kind of fallen apart, so we're getting that back up and running. It's been a real struggle with us through the turnover from the original guys getting into kind of a new way of doing things. But yeah, I mean, just being around the river and seeing what we do, you'll see our signs, you'll see us on Facebook and connecting through there. Even something as simple as a question or a comment helps us. We have a survey and a census study posted on our Facebook pages that I think we just closed, but that's been going up to help back up our scientific stuff that we're trying to do here. So if you're on the river and you're fishing and you have some experiences, please share them with us, because we're trying to compile that information and the sort of the angler's experience so that we can put it into the data. But the organization's been around for 27 years now, and it's not going anywhere. So we fully intend on staying strong, and any new blood, any new motivation, or any new ideas are always welcome, for sure.
Awesome. Well put. Cool. Well, yeah, if you think of anything else that you want to talk on regarding that, please mention it. But otherwise, let's hop into some time. Let's do it. So tonight's idea for everyone was, we're I might be dating this video now, but at the moment we are still in lockdown here down in Toronto. I know a lot of anglers are really itching to get up to the Grand, and maybe don't want to stray that far from home these days with the lockdown orders. So a lot of folks aren't going to be able to get onto the river until late May, early June this year. And so we kind of want to give folks a good sense. You're one of the most experienced anglers I know of on the river. Kind of what a typical late May, early June looks like on the river, and kind of what bug life is going to be like, what water levels and fish behavior is going to be like. And so we'll just kind of chat a little bit about that, and obviously this will work future years down the line if anyone's watching in the future as well. But yeah, if that sounds good to you, I'll kind of throw it over to you. As a reminder to everyone watching, if you have questions as we go along, just feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll answer them as we go.
All right, Chris. Yeah, you're breaking up in and out. I get the gist of what you're talking about.
We already chatted about this, so that was just for them.
Okay.
I'll throw it over to you.
Okay. So we want to talk about bugs. We want to talk about non 5 to 7 inch streamers tonight and get a little more nerdy, which is great because that's what my whole background is founded on. I spend more time collecting insects and trying to understand them and learn the names and everything else in my sort of teen years fly fishing on the Grand. So it's insects and hatches. You can, just like streamer fishing, you can take it as high level as you want, or you can take it as granular as you want, and you could fish so many different ways and so many different techniques and be so effective at targeting trout on insects that it obviously, I would say, outweighs any other way of fishing for them. Even more specifically, to me, the most productive way to approach fishing bugs is looking at subsurface or the emergent stage of insects. Fishing a dry fly hatch or a spinner fall on top, there's nothing that really beats it. I mean, that is key, but it's so visual. I don't think it's really, for me, you can tell kind of if you see sailboats coming down the river, it's a mayfly hatch. If you see a lot of big aggressive takes on the surface and slashing, it's usually going to be a caddis emerger or something that's really more active on the water rather than half dead or struggling to emerge. So for me, the Grand has changed, since I was a kid. Back when I was a teenager, we would have textbook hatches, right to the day, according to Ian Martin's book. Like you could have fly fishing the Grand River, you could take it down and you could look at the bug and you'd be like, yep, they're on the river. And 2 weeks later, you'd look at his chart, you'd look at Ian's chart, and you'd be like, yeah, it's back into small blue-winged olives, or there's some isonychias, and it would be textbook. It's really, there's a lot that's changed on the river, and there's no denying that. That's one of the reasons why Friends of the Grand is kind of trying to relook scientifically at what changes have impacted our fishery. Certainly, the benthics have changed. So where you could probably get through an entire season fishing mayfly emergers and Dunn dry fly hatches for the whole season, right through to the trichos in August. I don't personally focus on mayflies all that much. If you see it and you're there and you can spend the time on the water, great. But if you're like yourself, Chris, coming from Toronto and you're looking at more of a ballpark, what to expect and how to be productive, I'm going to tell you, switch to caddis. I mean, lockdown's over end of May. You're going to see at that time of year, hopefully right now we're in below summer low flows. But normally around May, June is prime time. So you're going to get a smorgasbord of mayfly hatches starting first thing in the morning, right through till well after dark. You're going to be into spinner fall activity with mayflies, but you're also going to see caddis. And, you're still going to get cooler mornings. Generally, end of May, 1st of June, you could be into 5 degrees in the morning. You're not going to see a lot of activity, even if you go at first light to try and get a spot or try and hit some water. More times than not, until the sun hits the water, is when you're going to see bug activity on the surface. Even during that, I'm not seeing a lot of fish rising or big fish rising, because don't get me wrong, when I'm nymphing or targeting with insects, I'm still looking for big fish. But caddis, I think predominantly from top to bottom is what I would focus on, especially end of May, early June is when they're just getting going. And they can be active all day long. And because of that, I generally would be nymphing either with an indicator or, Euro nymphing or however you're going to nymph, probably for the better part of the day. And then if I was going to be watching for activity, like surface activity, it's going to be more in the evening time for caddis. Not to say you're not going to start to see fish roll at 10 a.m. when the sun hits them and the caddis start really emerging, because when it happens, it's pretty engaging. So tonight, we've got 2 patterns. Both are caddis. Both can be nymphed on the bottom. They can be swung as an emerger, and they can be dressed and fished on top. Nymphing, I don't ever anymore use a lot of beads or a lot of weight on my nymphs. I'm fishing an indicator, so I'm using split shot and weight to get my fly where I want it to be. Or when nymphing, I'm actually sometimes, depending on the time of year, I'll actually run a drop shot system where I'll actually have the fly on a tag end somewhere incrementally up the line. Sort of helps to keep the hook clean of algae, especially when we get algae on the river and you're dredging bottom. But I don't weight my flies, and that way they're even more versatile. So if I want to fish, nymphing on the bottom with these same patterns, then I can. Or if I want to, switch to a full dry fly rig and a tapered leader and swing it, I can. If I then see fish active, taking emergers or adults on the surface, then same thing. I can honestly tell you guys, I have basically 2 fly patterns for nymphing on the Grand, because usually I'm streamer fishing up until the end of May till things really get active, and by then it's caddis. So, and really non-specific, really suggestive. I know that between streamer fishing and nymphing and trying to match a hatch, all great stuff, all very effective. I find suggestive, the more buggy your nymph is, the less refined it is. Almost sometimes the most poorly tied ones actually fish better as an emerger, because an emerger is essentially a blob of exoskeleton and shuck and air bubbles, and that's all it is. I mean, you pull an emerger out of the water, and it literally looks like a like river snot, basically. So there's not a lot of defining features to them, which is good because it enables you to tie a really buggy fly that's super effective, because that emerger stage is like so highly coveted by fish. It's rare that you're going to see a perfectly, dressed hydroseki caddis that a fish is going to dig in on the bottom and weed around to find that. As soon as that caddis larva starts to come off the rocks, it's changing. So suggestive rather than imitative is my bag. So simple materials, simple whole techniques here. There's really nothing out of the ordinary. So the first pattern they're not mine. The first pattern's an iris caddis. Pretty predominant pattern in the caddis business. Originally kind of developed down in Montana on the Madison River by Craig Matthews and the guys down there. It's really like Gary LaFontaine was involved in the development and always said that this is probably one of the best caddis emergers that he's ever fished. It's can be dressed and fished on the surface. It can be fished just under the surface, in the surface. You can weight it, fish it way down on the bottom of the water column, and it's basically my number 2. Because I'm in this situation, Chris, I don't have my actual boxes are all in the truck right now, but we will tie one. The other pattern is like completely hands down. If I had one pattern to get me through the entire season, it's going to be a Davey Watten pattern. And I've tied this before for you guys in person at the brewery, I think is where I tied it. But the pattern is Davey Watten's SLF Trans Caddis. It doesn't seem to be super well known. It was developed to fish the caddis hatches on the White in the spring. The thing is mental. Like, it is a really simple fly and just so deadly. I could honestly say I could probably do well for the majority of the season on one pattern in 2 sizes. So it's a pretty cool pattern. It's pretty fun to tie, actually. And when you see how good it works, you'll probably question why you haven't found this thing earlier. So basically, I think, Chris, if you're good, we're going to try and flip screens here and get tie-in. I can show the materials up in front of my vise. I'm going to try and tie between me and the phone because I'm not tying big stuff tonight. So we'll see how this goes. You good? Okay. All right. So 2 different hooks we're going to do here. We're going to start with the iris. And again, super simple. There's probably a lot of variations and variants on this fly. But I'm going to tie as close to the most standard version as I can because you don't need to change it. hook I'm going to go on this, generally I'm fishing most of my nymphs and caddis stuff. I'm tying 16, 18s is sort of my two sizes if you were going to be tying them. This one here, I'm going to tie, this is just a heavy traditional size 14 hook, so you could get away with a mustad or anything that's a standard length shank. This one's a B175 Camisan, but there's a lot of different hooks out there that match this hook. So this is a standard shank, but a little heavier gauge. So it's a 2X heavy, and you can get into fine wire nymph hooks or dry fly hooks. I am dead against it. I'll overdress a dry fly to float a 2XL hook, because if you're going to catch an 18 to 22 inch brown on a size 18 dry fly hook, fine wire, you're going to bend it out. You're going to risk losing that fish. And with nymphs, I mean, so many years I spent tying on like hooks that are like your curved nymph hooks and fine wire stuff. And after two hangups on the rocks, it's toast. It's bent. It's basically done. So unless you feel like going through 24 flies in the first 3 hours of your fishing day, then I would recommend beef up the gauge of the hooks. It's going to go so much further, and you're going to feel so much more comfortable fighting fish on these hooks. And I've narrowed it down to basically two different hooks in a 2XL for all of my nymphs, all of my dry flies. If I really wanted to get finicky, I might go finer wire on like a sparsely tied spinner or something like that. But basically, no. So the idea of the Iris caddis is that it's a bit of a short shank, because it's sort of, if you think about Gary LaFontaine's sort of sparkle pupas and all that, they're very compact. They're not really lengthened out like the larva. At this point, they're all kind of compressed together and all bubbling up. So this is essentially a blob of fluff on a hook. So we're going to start with, again, I'm tying this on a 16. In the mornings when I'm nymphing, I'm usually start by searching by using sort of a 16. If I start to see like I'm getting a couple takes, but it shows they're interested in that pattern, but they're not really engaging, then I'll maybe bump it up to an 18. There's a lot to be said for crane fly larvae and small midges up into the 20s to 24. By all means, have at it, but I'm pretty successful sticking to this game plan, and it's super simple and deadly effective. So we're going to tie on. I'm just using, most of the thread I tie with is a UTC 70 denier, or anything kind of mid fine. I can tie anything up to a 20 on this. The other advantage of this thread is that you can split it if you want to throw stuff in a loop. And it's just got a perfect amount of tension and thread control for these smaller guys. So many threads out there, though. It really comes down to whatever you're comfortable with, and this is just what I've landed on for anything under the streamer world. So we're going to tie on. Basically, with caddis, you're always going to kind of gauge yourself by 2/3, 1/3 rule. So I usually tie on just like if I was setting, leaving headroom on a streamer. It's the same kind of thing. I'm always using my thread to kind of gauge where I want to land, so I don't crowd the eye of the hook. So tying onto the back there, and for the dubbings, basically I use a lot of this Arizona synthetic dubbing. It's basically a synthetic blend that almost has a natural hare's ear feel to it, but it's got just the right amount of shine for anything to do with emergers. It's a great dubbing. In these patterns, I have found that regardless of whatever specific species of caddis you're fishing, whether it be a Hydrocekia, Chimera, or Chematiciki, or whatever, basically orange, brown, or olive, I find that golds and tans, gold, tan, olive is sort of the tones that you want for these flies. As soon as they start emerging and pupae, or like coming up, you're going to get that same look to them no matter what. So I would say any blend, if you wanted to take some regular hare's ear dubbing and throw a bit of polar or ice dub in it, just to kind of give it a bit of sparkle for that emerging kind of air trapping look, then go for it. But in this case here, I'm basically using sort of yellow, greens, and tans is my goal, and usually a darker head than body. So the first step here, and you can just dub this, so you can put some thread wax on there and dub up a body. I usually like, because I really, right out of the box, want a really buggy look, I'm going to throw this in a loop. So I'm just going to make a small dubbing loop with my thread, and you could split this thread or not. So to do that, I'm just making a small loop here. If anyone has any questions about how to do a dubbing loop, let me know. But basically I have a dubbing spinner here. I'm getting it on the thread like that. I'm going to hit it with a little bit of wax. And then I'm going to take just a small pinch. A little bit goes a long way with this stuff. So I'm going to take basically a small pinch and kind of just even it out so I have an even bunch. I'm going to throw it in this loop just like that. And if you don't have enough, if you don't feel you have enough, the reason why I throw it in the dubbing loop instead of split it is because I can tie it off if I put too much in, or I can add more if I don't like the amount. So there, I'm confident that's going to be enough to do this, and I'm just going to spin that up. Okay. I don't know if you can see that, Chris, but you can see how buggy that is.
Oh yeah, and you can
already.
see, yeah, you can just see the sheen on it too. It's awesome.
Yeah, so it's not a really tightly, because of the nature of these fibers, it naturally leaves a bit of a shuck. And I just remembered here, I totally forgot a step. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to leave that over here. I'm going to save this by tying in an antron or a Zelon shuck. So here we've got basically a ginger colored Zelon or antron. Pretty interchangeable on this material, but we're going to tie that in. That's the reason why I'm using the shorter shank, is because that shuck is going to lengthen the fly, so I don't want a longer shank body. So I'm just going to take a small amount, or just one sort of, it comes in a hank or off the spool. I want it pretty sparse, and I don't like to cut this sort of even. So you can see I've got about a body width there, or a body length. I'm going to tie that in. Don't do what I do though and tie this tail in before you do your dubbing loop. I'm going to try and save it. And just to keep the body taper going, I'm going to wrap that end of the Zelon up the shank. Okay. And if it's a little bit too long, you can cut that off, taper it a little bit. Okay. I do this every time. I leave out probably the most important part every time I tie a fly for you, Chris.
You do seem to be on a bit of a streak with it.
Okay, so we've now got our dubbing loop. I'm going to take a hackle plier. And we're just going to wrap this up the body. It'll start to catch the loop right at the tail. Because this is, you want this really picked out, it's gonna really blend in with the trailing shuck, which is kind of the goal that I have. So you can taper it as you go. It's not really too important here. You could go back on it if you wanted to build up some body bulk, but because of how picked out this is, you really don't need a thick body. So I've come up probably about 2 eye gaps away from the eye of the hook, and that's going to allow me to place my wing on this. So we are going to do a bit of a wing butt on this thing. Okay. So there's the body and the tail, and again we've got a bit of a ginger tone, so you don't really see it, but I think it does make a big impact when you talking about streamers, how you tone them, how even subtle changes in color really define a fly. with the ginger tail on this and then the sort of gold olive body, it really creates sort of an overall profile that is ultra fishy in the water. So that's it. Basically, you tie a tail, body in there with a dubbing loop. If you are more, if you're on the water and you wanted that body more tight, then by all means, just use whatever you want. Okay, so for the wing, pretty simple. We're going to take, this is a Zelon and a cream, just for a lighter wing. So this is an emerging caddis. You could tie this wing, you could double up on your Zelon if you wanted it to float more. As we tie the loop in, you could also leave sort of a waking post out the front. That's been done as well to help create, a skittering caddis or something, if you're fishing them at night and you want a little bit more activity on the surface. You could do that too. But generally, I'm going to be nymphing these. So I'm going to take one hank of this. Lots of ways you can tie this in. You could either sort of loop it before you tie it in, like that. And you can see the loop there. We were going to tie this in horizontally over the bug. And basically, you could also tie it in one at a time. So, if you can't get in and are not used to tying flies this small, you could tie it in on this side and then loop it around and tie in the other side. But we're going to go ahead and make a loop and double it up. And again, this is if you wanted a more bulky wing, and this synthetic stuff as well, you can dress it with any floatant and it will sit in the column. Floats really well, the Zelon. So I've got a horizontal loop here. I'm going to set it over top, and I just want it to extend back to the start of the tail. So basically where I tied in the fly at the back. And I'm just going to pinch that down and give it a couple wraps in over top. And then I'm going to pull this back and lock it in by tying in front. Okay. And this is the point where if you were planning on going out and you know that there's fish active, aka first, second week of June, and you're going to stick it out and fish into the dark, this is where you could leave this post out the front. You could finish the fly and then trim it off short, and it's going to create even more buoyancy because it'll take on more floatant. And at the end of your drift, when you don't have any idea where your fly is and you just let it swing out, you could see some pretty aggressive takes on that as well. So you can take this fly and vary it 18,000 different ways. But I'm going to go ahead and trim that off because I'm going to be nymphing this thing. And the last step basically is to tie in a head. Usually I'll go a couple tones darker. So in this case, I'm going to go with dark hare's ear color. And you could use, if you wanted, if you were planning on fishing this in the surface, you could use like a deer hair blend, like a SLF spiky dub. There's a lot of European, like Hens does a lot of deer hair dubbings that are incredible. Throw that in the loop and do a really buggy head with like a deer hair dubbing, and those things just float like crazy. This case, I'm going to go with the synthetic dubbing again, just because my intention on this is subsurface. So I'm not going to bother throwing this in a loop because I do want it a little bit neater, but I will hit it with some wax and touch that on. So you'll see with this dark hare's ear, we are creating a pretty, well, you might see it, I don't know, a good tone here where we're starting with a lighter gold ginger. We got a yellow gold and cream colored wing for sort of that emergent shuck. And then this is basically all that's left of the actual larva is this darker head. Okay. Again, buggier the better. I don't know, Chris, are you guys able to see that? Can I
Yeah,
get a little
great.
closer on it, or?
Yeah, if your camera goes closer, yeah, actually, yeah, if you give a little turn like that, it's a nice look. Yeah, but no, it's yeah, super buggy for sure.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And deadly, deadly, deadly go-to. So not top secret. It's been out there for a long time. I'll maybe just try and hone in on it a little bit more.
Maybe it's having a hard time focusing that close.
Yeah, it's not picking it up there.
People just have to tie it at home to get a close-up look.
Yeah. I mean, guys, you can look up Craig Matthews and you can see him tying this fly online as well. You can obviously look this fly up and you're going to see it all over the place. A lot of people treat it like an emerger and a dry fly. I'm saying sink the sucker. Caddises are going to start to emerge within the first 6 inches of the bottom of the river, and I'm telling you, all day long, this thing is great. So we'll finish this off with just a, there we go, whip finish here. I'm using a orange colored thread. You could use, if you wanted to give it a bit of a hot spot there, you could go with like a yellow or something that really stands out from the fly. But essentially, that's good to go. And I can guarantee you could tie a dozen of those in an hour, or once you get going, even less. So 16 and 18 standard shank hook. That's the way to proportion these things right. Sparse and, you know, less is more with synthetics in the water, because they definitely take on a lot of profile.
Very cool. Is there I guess you're saying that you fish this pretty well all day everywhere, but do you find that there is a type of water that you do better with it in?
Type of water?
Yeah.
Anywhere where you can find. You know.
Fair.
Caddis are so predominant and prevalent on the Grand, from top to bottom. You could start at the Shand and be fishing the same caddis as you're going to see 25K downstream, you know, below Wilson's Flats. I mean, you're going to see some different types of caddis happening. Obviously, in the top end where you have a lot of limestone rock, you're going to see a lot of hydroceques, you know, those olive green ones, the bright orange ones. As you get down through the middle section below the gorge, you're going to start seeing rocks that are just covered in case caddis. So different species altogether. I mean, there's something to be said for case caddis. Nymph imitations as well. I'll tell you that. We won't get into one tonight, but maybe self-isolation episode 4, we'll talk about that a little more. But, you know, this as an emerging caddis will cover a hydroceque, a chimera, a chematoceque, a case caddis, you know, a net spinning caddis, whatever. It's all the same to me. So you can expect to fish this same pattern no matter where you go. Yep. You're going to look for water that's going to be able to carry enough current and have buckets so you can sort of nymph it most effectively. There's nothing more monotonous than fishing with a fly rod anyways, whether you're Euro nymphing or indicator fishing. You know, there's nothing worse than sitting there and watching one drift take you 5 minutes because you're fishing water that's just not moving. So in that case, I would probably come up with a different tactic. I would either check that water out later when there may be some surface activity and you can actually present a fly better. But anything moving that'll carry your drift, that has some good substance to it in the form of structure and also knowledge that there should be fish there, that's what I'm going to be nymphing these kind of patterns with.
Yep. Cool. Very nice. Very nice.
Okay.
We've got a second one. Let's see it. Look at this. We're half an hour, call it half an hour in, because the first 10 minutes was just us chatting. And we're done a fly.
Look at that. Usually it's 3 hours of fly, Chris. It takes us 3 episodes to get through it. Oh, you know what we should do tonight too is we should pick the name of the winner from the last episode for the name of the streamer. So by the end, I hadn't checked out what the names were, so you have to let me know.
I'll find the list and mail that out. Yeah, I'll work on that while we're tying this next one.
All right. So this is my hands down favorite pattern. It's a Davy Watten pattern. The guy is a genius. He is an extremely intelligent person. I've met him several times in my travels down to the White River. Davy is like something the stories you hear about the guy, it's incredible. his flies and his knowledge of aquatic and the way insects behave, I don't think there's anyone out there that, you know, he's up there with the top. Let's put it that way. But again, his flies and his patterns are highly suggestive, and that to me has proven over the years to be the most effective. So this SLF Transcatus is just that. It's pretty unique though in the design of it, and again, you can fish it top to bottom, which has been great and deadly effective for me. The other thing I should have mentioned about the Iris too is, I mean, if you were concerned that this is going to sink and you wanted something high floating, you could do your wing in a loop CDC. You could then do your head and spin a dubbing loop of CDC with that too, and it's going to give you that. It's going to continue to give you that buggy look, which is essential on the surface with a caddis, but also that extra buoyancy too. Same with this one. I've done the head of this with spun or looped CDC to give it the legs and toning and everything else, and it's done great too. I mean, you could do this whole thing in CDC if you wanted to, but anyways, it's cool because it has a wing on it, and a lot of other caddis emergers don't have this style of wing, and I find that the way it fishes in the water is totally insane. So again, the hook I'm going to tie this on, this is where I'm going to a 2XL hook and a 3X heavy. So this is a Mustad Nymph Sprout. It's got the perfect shank length on it, the perfect bend, and deadly sharp, and pretty readily available. I think this is kind of a go-to nymph that you can run this all the way into the 12s and 10s for steelhead. I tie my steelhead nymphs on this hook in a 14. So if I'm tying a batch of pheasant tails for indicator fishing for steelhead in the fall, it's on this. Great proportion for a lot of mayfly nymphs too. So you'll find, you know, if you've tied a lot on the Tiemco 200R, which is basically the curved nymph hook, I find number one, it's a fine wire hook in general, but number two, I find that unless you're tying stoneflies or hoppers on that thing or stimulators, it's a pretty long shank for an average mayfly. So this is what I've landed on. This is basically my go-to for durability, for confidence in fighting fish efficiently, because, you know, as you creep into the end of June, fighting a fish for 20 minutes is going to have potentially a fatal impact on that fish than if your confidence in fishing 4.5x tippet on a heavy shanked fly or heavy wire hook. I can guarantee you that I could probably bring in a 20-inch fish in an average run on the Grand in 5 minutes as opposed to potentially 10 or 15. Anytime you can do that, go for it. Do fish care about the gauge of this hook? Absolutely not. Have I seen fish, unless you're getting into midges and stuff like that, have I seen fish care about 6x tippet as compared to 5? No. I don't think they're scared of it. I think they see enough of it. And if you've got a unique pattern that's fished well, I think that overshadows a lot of the other things. So, you know, if there's me being my conservative approach, it's beef up your terminal tackle as much as you can to not spook the fish. And first step is in the hook. So this is a great hook. And if anyone has any more questions or wants me to send them specs on anything, just let me know. So we'll throw that in again. Barb is on this. Usually I wait till I'm on the river, but for any of my nymphs for the Grand, I'm going to pinch the barb in the vise or before I throw it in the vise. So you can do that there. All right. So Transcatus, I'm going to tie this with the same thread. Same sort of approach to the back end. So I'm going to leave quite a bit of room, probably just over a third of the shank length at the front. And I'm going to leave that bare just so I know from a gauge where I need to lie. Okay, so I'm going to tie back to the bend. Again, I'm going to do another loop. And you will see a video of this online where Brian Wise, it's the best Brian Wise video that's ever been done. I don't know what it is about this Watten video, but Davy splits this thread and he pulls it back behind his, by his side, and then literally runs his thumb up the thread and it spins the loop in the split thread. It's just incredible. It's something so simple, but it's really mind blowing. I will split this thread if I'm tying a couple dozen of these things and I know exactly how much dubbing to pinch into that loop. But usually I'll do it this way so that if I need to tie off, I can if I've used too much, or can add more if I've used too little. This particular fly, I'm going to use the same dubbings, but here, if you can see that in the light, I'm going really olive gold. That seems to be the best color. So I'm going to either, sometimes if I wanted to really change it up, I could go with a peacock, sort of synthetic peacock color for the head to really darken it up. You can play around with colors on this. I mean, sky's the limit, but I will tell you yellows, olives, golds are where it's at. So I'm going to do the back of this fly, and we can hit this just with a little bit of wax. I'm going to go with this actual color, if you wanted to know, was golden stone for the abdomen on this. So again, I'm going to prep a sparse pinch of this because it's going to be really buggy stuff, and it's almost going to create a shuck in behind it as I tie the body. Okay. And again, if I'm not super happy with the amount, now's your opportunity to throw some more in. I might throw another little pinch in. Okay, and then that's it. We're going to spin that up. I see some bunching. I want a nice looser rope on that, and don't overspin it or you'll break that thread. So I'm just going to take that in the hackle plier. And I really want this to be super buggy. So I'm going to pick that out. I could use a dubbing brush, if I felt that I wanted to, but the buggier the better. That way you don't need to wait for it to get all chewed up before it fishes well. And this fly, I will tell you, I mean, this is like a first cast, first drift sort of fly. If they're on, this is going to tell you that they're on, in my opinion. I'm just going to, usually you can throw this, in the bobbin cradle and use your rotary function here to get a nice, just quick, even body. But with the phone between me and the vise here, that wasn't really going to work too well. So, okay, so I'm, again, as I go around, I'm picking that way out. Super picky. I'll give it one more wrap there, and that'll be it. So 2 in over top and 2 in front. Trim that off. And there's the abdomen, so then I'll just lock that in a little bit. The next step is sort of the one of the real keys in this, and I'm going to use, in this case, medallion sheeting in a yellowish tan, again keeping with that theme of golden and tans, but it's going to tone and really let that body, this is going to be an overwing, okay, and then we're actually going to use it and fold it back on itself and create a bit of a wing case in the front. So I'm going to cut about just under a 1/4 inch strip of this, and basically what I'm going to do is to prep it, I'm just going to cut a bit of a taper, so an angled cut there, so you can see you have a taper there. And I'm going to take this and put it over top, and I want it to just extend beyond the back of the bend of the hook. So it's going to go just beyond the actual hook itself. Keep it centered on top. I'm going to pinch that. Give it a couple wraps. And I will check just to make sure. So you can see that now I've got a pretty flat wing on top. And I got that super buggy stuff on the bottom. Now, with medallion sheeting, I know this looks pretty old timey. Like this is like, oh man, this is like a 1960s dry fly bug. But we'll finish it off, and it's super effective. And as suggestive as it is when it's wet, it looks so much like a real emerging caddis that you couldn't even tell them apart, really. Okay, so I'm going to wrap that forward a couple turns, and then I'm going to pull this back on itself. Okay, and I'm going to leave that just like a pheasant tail nymph. I'm going to leave that for my wing case. All right, so I'm just going to, get that secured back. We're basically about 2/3 and 1/3 is the proportion on this between the thorax and the abdomen. And then we're going to throw some legs on this. So Watten actually will take a wet fly hackle. I'm going to take a Hungarian partridge, just take a small feather, take some legs off it. You could, if you wanted more legs, you could actually, this is where you would palmer or hackle up an entire saddle or hen saddle or whatever. You can use whatever you want. In this case, though, I find that I just go a little bit more sparse on the legs. And so I'll take, one feather. I like to get one of the feathers, like usually from the actual rump that's got a lot of barring over here on the side. Like these Hungarian partridges are going to have a whole bunch of different feathers as you go through it. But I want, something from over here on the side, as long as it's big enough, that's going to give me a lot of that barring. And my dog years ago, this is an old partridge, my dog ate it. There's still enough feathers left to get me by. So select a feather. We're not gonna, and again, you can do whatever you want here, whatever looks best to you. Because similarly with nymph fishing, it's confidence, just like streamer fishing. I'll talk about that a lot. And it's like my dogs ate most of the good feathers off this. There we go. So to prep this, you could just cut a V out of the tip and then put it over like that. I'm actually just going to strip, so just like a marabou feather, like I think I've done on some of my others where I'm creating collars. Peel this back, take as many or as little legs as you want, align them up and pull them off, and basically I just have a tuft of feather there. I'm going to tie this in on the side, and I don't want these legs. These are just kind of like the emerging legs. So, where Watten's legs actually extend beyond the whole body. In this case, I'm going to be nymphing this. So I'm going to try and get as finicky as you can get there. I just want the legs just to kind of come out, just past where the hook barb would be. And I'm tying those right on the side and sort of angled down towards the hook gap. Okay. So a couple turns there, and then I'm going to take the other side of the feather, and I'm going to take those legs off, align them, and I'll tie the other legs on the other side. And, they don't need to be even. I'm going to tie them in on the side away from me, give it a couple turns. Okay, so now we've got legs sort of both sides. It's good enough there. I'm going to trim those off. Again, nothing really out of the ordinary tying this bug. There's not a lot of craziness going on. Okay, but now so we can see we've got the back, the wings there, and the more this gets chewed up, the more that wing just becomes even more natural. So we got a bit of a trailing shuck coming out the back based on that dubbing loop. We've got the legs. What else do you need on a caddis emerger? I don't think there's really much more to them. And then I'm going to take here, I'm going to keep with that golden olive theme, and I'm going to go with like a golden brown, I think is this color. You could go with an olive, or again with a hare's ear, even peacock if you wanted. But the thing about this dubbing is that it does have a sparkle and a sheen to it, which is awesome because it, in the spirit of an emerging aquatic insect, air bubbles and shine like that seem to go hand in hand. Okay, so again, I'm going to go a little just with a just straight dubbing loop or dubbing on this. You don't really need to unless you um, really want to, and just make sure your legs stay out the side there. You don't trap them down. So I'm just kind of building a little bit of a head. If I don't have enough, I just add more. So I'll dub some more on there. Okay, so then I'll just bring my thread after that head's done to the eye. Okay, this is where I'll maybe take a little bit of time to pull down or pull down the fibers of the dubbing so that they don't stick up as I pull the wing case over. And then I basically just pulled that wing case over the front. Okay, and I'm going to give it a couple wraps, pull that tight, knock my phone over, we're back. And then I'm going to pull this back and just lock that in with a couple turns. And you can come in with your scissors, trim that off, and finish the fly. Don't you do there is a head component to caddis emergers too, right? Like they've got a bigger head, so generally, and you'll see in when Watten does this too, he will do a bigger head than most, and kind of split that thread on there. So we will clean that up. Okay. And then if it was a little balled up, like sometimes, I don't know if you guys can see that, but underneath there, that ball is a little too pronounced. I don't like that profile. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a dubbing brush and pick that out a little bit just to create more of a taper and even more suggestive bugginess. So there you've got the wing on the top. You've got the legs emerging out the side that blend right into the body.
Yep.
Got a good head on that and that wing case. This thing's ridiculous.
Yep. Can you just kind of shift your vise over so it's more centered because we lost the focus on it?
More to center.
I think that'll do it. There it is. There's the fly. Nice. That thing's just crazy buggy. Wow. Very, very cool. And so again, mainly, I guess, again, nymph, dry fly. Do you have a preference which one you would fish as dry over the other?
Sorry, say that again, Chris.
Oh, so you're talking about how you'd fish either one of these as a nymph or a dry. But if you're going to fish one as a dry, do you have a preference which one you fish on top?
If I had a preference, probably the more buoyant one is going to be the iris caddis, just because of the Zelon wing and because that thing, because it's all synthetic, it'll take so much floating or whatever you dress your flies with, it really takes well. This thing, you could probably, just as is with these materials, you could probably dress that and see it in the surface during the daylight. I would say that this is, you could also, if you're putting your legs on it, you could go a little heavier on the legs, and that's going to just help take some of the help with the buoyancy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not gonna fish like right up on the surface. So if you think like an elk hair caddis, this is going to be visual like an elk hair caddis, the iris here. Maybe not quite as much, but it's not meant to. This is going to be right in the film. And if I was going to really want this to remain a dry fly, if I was going to tie the same pattern, knowing that I'm going to go and try and target some last light sort of fish that are, you can see them just flash and just pissing you off because they're just right there in front of you and they don't care because they're eating caddis. I would probably do the thorax here in a CDC loop and really go heavy on the CDC because that's going to give you some buoyancy. The other thing you could easily do on both of these is do the head with like a spiky deer dubbing that I've seen, and don't quote me on the brands of it, but I know there's some Euro European companies out there that have some dubbings that are like blended deer hair, and I mean that stuff's just like spinning a deer hair head. You could also, on this pattern, if you wanted to get finicky and nerd out a little bit, you could probably set an elk hair, a very sparse elk hair collar, or even a foam wing post in here when you pull the back over. So you could probably tuck in a small high vis piece of yellow foam or something that wouldn't be visible to the fish, but it would help sit you in the surface. By all means, I mean, fish are looking up, they're not going to see a yellow foam post up there to help support your fly. And again, fishing these things, the other thing you could do is take some, whatever that putty is, that sort of that indicator putty, and almost like as a strike indicator, you could run this, 16 inches away. But if you can't see the damn thing, then you can run some indicator putty, or sort of a really small strike indicator, just enough so you can see it. And 9 times out of 10, after stalking, fish are going to eat that indicator putty more than they're going to eat your fly anyway. So at least you'll know where the fish are.
Yeah. Cool. I like it. We did have a question from Marty. He was curious. So if you're nymphing it with the split shot, maybe this varies a little bit depending on if it's the drop shot setup or more traditional split shot setup. Sort of what's your rig looking like for nymphing? How do you set your shot? How far from the fly?
Okay, so I think I caught that. So we're talking about my leader setup for nymphing.
Yeah, leader, and his question was more specific to your weights, your split shot, but yeah, leader would be good too. Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so split shot basically is the way my standard nymph rig setup is the same for steelhead as it is for trout. You're basically having an indicator that you're comfortable with. I just tie my own leaders. I don't use any tapered leaders for any of my leader setup. Generally, I'm running a 10-foot leader to give me enough room to, well, number one, you don't want to go too long with this setup because you need to turn all that stuff over. But number two, you want to make sure that you can approach any kind of depth of water column or speed of current with the leader. So on the Grand, I'm usually setting my system up at 10 feet. Starting with a heavier pound, like I'll probably start with a butt section of 35 or 30 to 40 pound butt section, and then I'll blood knot that down to an inexpensive fluoro. I'll switch from the butt section, then I'll get into fluoro, and I'll run maybe a 25 pound. Then if I'm really feeling like I got time to tie a leader, I'll actually step it down more, and I'll go from like a 30 pound down to a 20 pound down to a 15 pound fluoro. But basically, you step it down for about 7 feet, and then you get into the more finicky lines where I'll get into more specific tippet fluorocarbon type stuff. So within 16 to 18 inches of the split shot, I'm going to run 4x fluoro. Okay, and I'm usually going to run a very small swivel. So I will be running from the butt section down to eventually where the fly is going to be. I'm going to have a swivel with a tag end, and on that tag end on the 4x, I'm going to have an overhand knot, and I'm going to have my split shot running off that. And then off the other end of the swivel, I'm going to have probably, well, depending on the time of year, 4 or 5x tippet, about 13 inches, 14 inches down to the fly. That split shot is going to take the fly down where I need it. I'm using split shot that I can add or take off. So they're like the little Pac-Mans that you can actually take it off if you're too heavy or add more. And my flies are always weightless because I want a natural drift. So I'm using my split shot to get down, and within that foot, I'm giving that fly room to drift around in the current, and the split shot here is anchoring it. So size of split shot, I'm usually, I don't know what they are, whatever the smallest size is, Chris, that would have that ability to take them off. I think it's like a BB size, or it's the same split shot I use for steelheading. And I will start with 2. And usually after the first couple drifts, if we're fishing 5 CMS, I'm probably going to be adding more depending on the run. Too much, you're going to get hung up within 10 seconds of that drift, and it's going to be not fun for you. And too little, and you're not going to be in the zone, especially when fish aren't starting to show themselves and be more active up here. So you gauge it. And usually I'm going to start with 2, and I'm going to gauge my depth to my indicator, a little bit deeper than the run, usually 1.5 times the depth. And I'm going to watch the first 2 floats. If I'm ticking a couple times adrift, then I'm generally feeling pretty comfortable that I'm on the money. If I go 3 drifts and nothing happens, then I'm going to change something. And I'm probably going to add 1 more split shot and 6 inches of length on my indicator until I get those drifts where it's feeling juicy. You're seeing a couple ticks, you're maybe getting a stalker, then that you're on to something. That's basically my leader setup. If I'm going with a drop shot setup, it's basically just reversing the location of the split shot with the fly and tying a few more sections of fluoro so that you can run tag ends to the fly. And that's equally as effective too, and it actually works quite well when we get algae in our rivers and you get sick and tired of pulling a giant clump of weed off of your fly every drift.
Yep.
And it also helps too. The benefit of drop shotting is, if you're not a fan of swinging, traditionally swinging a wet fly or an emerger, nymph that thing on a drop shot rig and run it 3.5 feet up to your fly, and all of a sudden you're presenting the fly in a somewhat natural way, but you're nymphing, which is where your comfort level probably isn't catching fish. And it is pretty cool to see how when you play around with a drop shot rig and you can literally just move your fly up and down, it does have an effect, and it is a pretty technical and solid way. You would think that you're going to get tangled up in everything, but you really don't. For those areas or situations where you can fish multi-fly systems, like a weighted anchor fly on the bottom and then an emerger up top is pretty cool too.
And Nick, did you say 2 things? So if you're fishing a drop shot, say mid-column, trying to fish something a little bit more emergent, sort of that wet fly style, is your split shot staying down toward the bottom, or is the split shot coming up in the water column too?
Chris, I gotta apologize. I totally missed that.
Yep, that's okay. So you're talking about fishing a drop shot a little bit more mid-column. If you're doing that, are you changing the overall length of like split shot tags so that your split shot is still on bottom, or is the split shot coming up mid-column too?
So a drop shot rig basically is, so I'm going to set up the top end of my leader the same way. And then when I get down to that, basically don't even worry about the fly. You're just basically tying a leader to attach. I don't know if anyone's fished a drop shot system on spinning gear where you have that bell sinker on the bottom. That's all I'm doing. So I don't run a swivel anymore because I'm going to have that fly, the tag end to the fly here is going to be pretty close. So I just don't use a swivel. So basically I'll just tie 3 sections of 4X in 12-inch intervals with blood knots down so that I have the ability to put my drop shot tag end anywhere in those 3 sections. So if I hook a fish up midway through one of my pieces of tippet and hook that fish, the first thing it's going to do as I pull tight is it's going to come down and cinch up on that blood knot, and then I got the fish on. So it's like an instant set. But at the bottom, I just basically do an overhand knot and add my split shot down there. So I just put them on the tippet line, and that's it.
Right. So you have bare droppers to adjust the depth. You aren't sliding around your indicator or moving split shot. You're using different droppers for each depth that you'd fish that at. Gotcha.
Yeah. Cool. So I'll pre-tie. I think I got that. I'll pre-tie a bunch of 6-inch tag ends of 5X, and and it's kind of finicky. So, but it is what it is. You're going to put a perfection loop or whatever in it on the end of it. So it's basically like the butt section of your leader that you attach to your fly line. You're going to tie probably 5 or 6 of those for a morning outing because you're going to get about 3 fly changes on that tag end before it's too short. to tie another one. So that's the one disadvantage of it. But you tie 6 of them, put them in a bag, take them with you, and basically you'll take that loop and just loop it over your main line and pull it back through the loop, just like you would attach it to a fly line. That way it just cinches tight on the main line, but it'll hold. So if you cinch it tight midway between your tippet, it's going to stay there. You could whip that thing out there and you crack that whip and it's still going to be there. If you hook a fish on it, though, the first thing it does is come down to the knot instantly, and it's an instant hook set.
Yep.
And that's the cool thing about it, because then, you know, the next cast, you don't need to do anything. If you want to go up a foot, all you do is slide it up, and it sits there. And you hook a fish, it comes back down 11 inches, but whatever. If you want to go up 2 feet, then you just bite that one off and put another tag end on above the next blood knot. So I'll tie like 3 sections just so I can adjust within the column.
Sure. So you have the looped sections of tippet that you're using for droppers looped around your tippet end, but then you have blood knots that you've already tied in your tippet as stoppers. Gotcha. Okay, that's an interesting system. That's cool. That's very cool.
And, it's
go ahead.
It's super simple. Yeah, there's nothing to it. I mean, and again, I'm running the same. And one of the other things about the drop shot rig too is you're even more in tune. I find it's a little more indicative of a strike than even your traditional indicator rig, because with the indicator rig, you've got your split shot here on a tag end, and then you got 12 to 14 inches to your fly, and it's weightless. So the current is pulling the indicator at top speed on the surface. You've got the split shot on the bottom, and then you got this fly that's like upwards of 14 inches away from being able to detect a strike, right? You've got a drop shot rig, it's top to bottom. So you've got an indicator here and you got your split shot here. And you can really be in tune with that sucker. So as the split shot starts dragging in the current, you're going to see that indicator you're going to know exactly when you're completely connected. And then that fly up here, like 3 inches off the main line. So basically, if a fish farts, you're going to see that indicator go down. It's pretty cool. So it is a little more deadly in detecting strikes once you get the hang of it. And is it a little more finicky maybe to get used to it? But you'll find within half an hour, you're just casting that thing out just like you're a regular rig you're comfortable with.
Yep. Cool. And did you say where the indicator slots into your leader setup? You have that 7.5 foot tapered stretch. It's going on the tapered part. It's going on which of the tapered stretches?
So I usually, where do I put the section for the indicator? I just try and make sure that I've got a longer piece, so I don't worry about that if I'm using a thingamabobber or whatever, that you have to take the thing off and go past the knot and get it to the next section. So I'll basically just so I can turn that rig over, I'm going to have about a foot of 30 pound, and then I'm literally going to run about 4 feet of like 15 pound fluoro, whatever that is for you.
Yeah.
And that's where my indicator is going to be. And then I start stepping down into the finicky tippet. So that 14 foot or that 4 foot piece of 15 pound basically is where I can literally just slide up and down to whatever depth I can fish. 8 feet, I can fish 6 feet, I can fish basically 4 feet. So I'm running a 1.5 feet, 2 feet of butt section, 4 to 5 feet of 15 pound. And then then you're into 7 feet. So your next 3 feet are basically your terminal rig.
Sure. Yep. No, that's perfect. Really, really good. Cool. Well, we didn't have any other questions at the moment, but if anyone does think of one in the next minute or two, feel free to drop them in there. We do have a contest to name the winner of, though, and I have a short list of names here for you. So for anyone who wasn't watching again in our streamer video, what was that, 3 weeks ago or so, you tied a fly which you hadn't yet come up with a name for, and so we had a little contest to see who could come up with the best name, and the winner will get the fly, or actually, was it? Yeah, it was the one fly there. So, looking here, we have, because it was about a 2-hour video, the 2-beer fly.
The which?
The 2-beer fly.
Gotcha.
2 beers. Yeah. The Groovy, not a bad one. And in the comments, we had another late entry. The Random Virtue Tester. So those are your choices there. Tough one, I know.
What was the middle one? Was the Groovy?
Groovy, yeah.
Yeah.
That calling your name?
You know what? I think that one rolls the best. Let's go with that one.
There you go. So that belonged to, I'll pull up the name again here. That was Rob Bamlet. So, Rob, if you're watching, congrats. If not, I'll get a hold of you. I can do that pretty easily. And
Yeah,
on new fly.
I think you said Rob there, Chris. If you got him, send me his details or send me details, and I'll get that mailed out.
Yeah, absolutely will do. I'll be excited, I'm sure. Awesome. So yeah, reminder again. Thank you for you and Jason and all the work that you guys do on the Grand and keeping it stocked and preserving it for all of us. And thanks for sharing some knowledge this evening. And yeah, if anyone wants to pitch in, I know you guys are always anxious to have the help. Future years, I assume you guys are going to keep the Grand Ops day going, Grand Opportunities.
Yeah, all of our programs are delayed this year, so we're going to target doing some tree planting in the fall, and some stream rehab work is going to be ongoing. We're maintaining right now, like our garbage kiosks are all going to be maintained by us. But as far as volunteer programs right now, we're just like there's no point, and
Yeah.
Grand Ops is going to be deferred again into probably next year. But we are going to be doing a symposium. More to come on that. Stay tuned to Friends of the Grand. We're going to be, more and more getting into the research and working with MNRF to try and assess our fishery 25 years later and try and make it and maintain it as good as it has been and is. So anyways, whatever you guys can do, reach out if you have any questions again. And yeah, we'd love to have some help.
Awesome. Absolutely. And I'm sure we've got lots of people who'd be very happy to pitch in. And speaking firsthand, those events are a lot of fun too. So when they do come back online, they're well worth the visit. Cool. So yeah, next week we have another special guest, first timer. We have Tyler Dunn coming on. Tyler is a guide up in the Sioux Rapids. Yeah. Guides up north for a whole bunch of stuff. And yeah, he's going to tie some of his favorite flies. That's going to be a real treat to see. Oh, Rob is watching, so he got the news on the fly, I guess. Cool. Yeah, we have Tyler coming on next week and some other guys in the works, so we're really excited about all that. In the interim, if anyone needs any materials, any kind of gear, you know where to find us, driftoutfitters.com. You can reach us at the shop anytime, place an order online, and we'll see you all soon. Have a good night. Thanks again, Nick.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Chris. We'll talk to everyone soon.
Sounds good. Cheers.
Yeah.